There is a lot of confusion after the US Supreme Court struck down the US President's tariff rates negotiated and signed with major countries under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA. The confusion arises around three scenarios. 1. What will India pay as a tariff when India and the US had sealed a trade deal that was supposed to be signed in the first week of March, under which the weighted average tariff India was expected to pay was 18%. Now, since the trade deal has not been signed yet, what is the status? 2. Countries like the UK and the EU had already signed trade deals under IEEPA and agreed to pay a tariff of 15%. What will they pay now? 3. Countries that have not yet reached the negotiation table, like Brazil and China, what will they pay? Let's start with the easy part. Scenario 1. Countries that already signed deals. The UK, EU, Japan, South Korea. Think about the irony here. Countries like the European Union, which had negotiated hard and agreed to a 15% tariff under IEEPA, now suddenly face only 10% under the replacement Section 122 order. They have effectively received a better rate than they bargained for, at least temporarily. For Japan, which had committed to a staggering $550 billion in US investments, including $36 billion in energy and critical minerals, the commercial substance of the deal remains intact. The investment commitments still stand, but the tariff mechanism that underpinned the deal is now legally dead and replaced. The critical caveat: Section 122 tariffs can only last 150 days by law. After that, around mid-July 2026, the administration will need Congress to pass legislation or pivot to another legal mechanism such as Section 232 national security tariffs or new Section 301 investigations. For countries that already signed deals, short-term relief, long-term uncertainty. Scenario 2. Countries with no deal at all. Vietnam, Brazil, and others. For countries that were either at the back of the line or actively resisting US pressure, the Supreme Court ruling provided momentary relief. Their punishing reciprocal tariffs, some as high as 46% for Vietnam, were also struck down under IEEPA. They now face the same flat 10% as everyone else. Briefly, they are on equal footing with Japan and South Korea. But that will not last. Section 301 investigations targeting unreasonable trade practices can be launched country by country, and the administration has signaled it intends to do exactly that for nations it views as structural violators. For these countries, temporary reprieve, not a pardon. What does India pay today? Three numbers, three faces. Let me walk you through each one. Phase 1. Before February 24, 2026. India paid 50% under the IEEPA regime that has now been struck down. India was paying a steep 50% tariff made up of two layers: a 25% reciprocal tariff from Liberation Day in April 2025, plus an additional 25% penalty tariff imposed in August 2025 because India continued buying Russian oil. That tariff wall is now gone. Phase 2. After the bilateral deal but before the ruling. India was set to pay 18% on February 6, 2026. Just 2 weeks ago, Modi and Trump announced a framework deal. Washington agreed to reduce India's tariff from 50% to 18%. That 18% was the price India negotiated for major concessions. zero industrial tariffs on US goods, $500 billion in US energy purchases, and a commitment to stop buying Russian oil. The deal was real, but it was built entirely on IPA authority, and IPA is now invalid. Phase 3. From February 24, 2026, India pays 10%. India now faces a lower tariff rate of 10%, down from 18%, after Trump announced a new global levy on imports into the US following the Supreme Court verdict. A White House official confirmed those countries will now be tariffed at the global 10% tariff using Section 122 legal authority. 10%, the same as Japan, Germany, Vietnam, and every country worldwide. India is not special, and at this moment, that is actually positive news for Indian exporters. But this 10% has an expiry date. The US will impose this tariff from February 24, 2026 through July 23, 2026, a window of exactly 150 days. After that, Section 122 expires by law. The administration has already indicated it will pursue other legal authorities to implement more appropriate or pre-negotiated tariff rates. What does not change? Section 232 tariffs. The 10% global tariff does not apply to goods already subject to Section 232 tariffs. That includes steel, aluminium, automobiles, semiconductors, and copper. Those tariffs, ranging from 25% to 50%, remain fully intact and were not affected by the Supreme Court ruling. So to be absolutely clear, India pays 10% on most goods starting February 24. But steel, aluminium, and automobiles still face 25 to 50% tariffs under Section 232. Two key questions need to be answered. One, why are some people saying India will pay 13.5% and not 10%? This stems from a misunderstanding of how the new tariff order works. Incorrect interpretation. Some analysts assume the new tariff equals the existing MFN tariff around 3.5% plus an additional 10%, leading to a calculation of 13.5%. But this is not how the order is structured. Correct rule. The new order imposes a minimum universal tariff floor of 10%. This means if a country pays less than 10%, it is raised to 10%. If a country pays more than 10%, the higher rate remains. So the formula is tariff applied equal to maximum of the existing tariff and 10%. Therefore, India pays 10%, not 13.5%, except for sectors like steel that fall outside MFN treatment. 2. Why did Trump say India would pay 18%? This is the core confusion between legal reality and political messaging. Trump's statement refers to a future reciprocal tariff framework, not the current tariff. Two systems exist. System A, active now, a temporary universal 10% tariff under Section 122. System B, not active. The negotiated reciprocal tariff framework targeting India at 18%. That framework is not signed, not legally implemented, only negotiated in principle, dependent on a different legal authority. In diplomacy, agreed does not mean legally binding. It often means negotiators reached an understanding in principle pending formal completion. So the statement reflects political positioning rather than legal reality. India wakes up to a dramatically different situation. The 50% tariff threat is gone. The 18% agreed rate is also legally invalid. India currently pays 10%, the same as major economies. Meanwhile, bilateral trade agreement negotiations are now in a legal grey zone. This is not a crisis, It is an opportunity, possibly India's biggest negotiating opportunity in a generation. 5 strategic steps. 1. Do not rush renegotiation. Let Washington move first. 2. Ensure 10% becomes the ceiling, not the floor in any agreement. 3. Use the EU-India FTA as a quiet benchmark. 4. Protect agriculture as non-negotiable. 5. Negotiate a phased reduction, not an abrupt cutoff of Russian oil imports. India must also diversify export markets to strengthen long-term negotiating leverage. Here is the clearest possible summary. India currently pays 10% effective February 24, 2026 for 150 days. The 18% deal is legally invalid, though politically referenced by Trump. The earlier tariff regime has collapsed, giving India significant negotiating leverage. This is India's strategic moment. How New Delhi responds will shape its position in the global trading system for the next decade. If this helped clarify one of the most consequential trade stories of our time, share it, leave your questions, and we will explore further. We'll see you next time.